In the video game industry, gacha refers to the practice of locking any kind of item, character, equipment, skill, etc., or more precisely a tool for the player to use, behind a lottery pool that you have to pay for, tied to a determined percentage of obtaining said tool. A gacha game, therefore, refers to a video game which features this kind of system as a core mechanic. But since almost all examples of gacha games are free-to-play titles found on Android and iOS, most people are referring to exclusively mobile games when talking about gacha games. Also hi, the name's Dinapkin, and this will be a deep dive into the world of mobile gaming practices, with a focus on gacha games. So if you are here to learn, welcome. Or if you are here to pile on gacha games, then welcome too, because we have a journey to embark on. This is part 1 where we'll talk everything gacha. And then in part 2 and part 3, we'll dissect a popular gacha game known as DX2. Yep, this is that kind of channel, so expect everything. As for me, I've been playing, researching and talking video games for over 15 years, and this video is built on top of that knowledge, plus 2 years of playing and monitoring the evolution of the said game, DX2, plus dozens of hours spent reading and informing myself about the mobile gaming world, through industry articles, other video essays, and also interacting and registering the opinions of people who play or have played mobile microtransaction heavy games in the past. We can say I did my research. In short, I am a video game expert, as you can clearly see by the name of this channel. I'm also a literally fucking nobody, especially when compared to other channels who dabbled in the mobile gaming world. But on those videos, I find that a lot of the terms, although correctly used, are not fully explained, particularly to people outside of the gaming loop. So my aim with this video is to provide a definitive source of information regarding everything related to these types of games. And I hope that my expertise on the subject can justify the existence of this video and your watch time. So let's start from the top and slowly dive into the deep abyss of the softwares we like to call gacha games. The term gacha itself comes from the Japanese gachapon, which refers to the machines where you have to insert a coin into a slot and turn the crank to get a random capsule containing a collectible within it. The reason for the crank and not being able to see inside the capsules is so people cannot control what they get. Originally the name was written like this, but since the term was copyrighted, other companies wanting to copy the system started using the totally legally distinct gachapon term instead, which then caught on and became the norm. While the most common sighting of these machines in the Western world are the ones with an assortment of cheap plastic toys, bouncy balls, bracelets, etc., the legacy Japanese gachapon machines each contain a small set of collectibles that are available for a limited time only, and so the consumer is urged to collect them all. It's the same deal you see in blind bags, it's the same deal from that no longer applicable on 90s show Slowly. Did you know? From animals to video games to literally everything else, the Japanese are crazy about gachapon. Do you know what the Japanese are also crazy about? Onomatopoeics. And funny enough, the word gachapon consists of 2 of them. Gacha gacha, which represents the sound of the crank rotating twice, and boom, the sound the capsule makes when hitting the tray at the bottom. And now that the pointless trivia is over, we can start the video proper. So now we know who and what gacha is. But why is gacha? Why is it even called gacha when most of the times you are summoning things and opening boxes? And more importantly, why is it so popular in modern video games in the first place? To answer those questions, we'll have to dive into the fantastic and wacky world of probabilities and gambling addiction that may destroy your life. Let us begin. Anyway, here's an hypothetical mathematical situation. A person approaches a physical gachapon machine and intends to use it. It could be just out of curiosity, or it could be a screaming kid in a mall wanting a new toy to forget about minutes later. But for the sake of this video, there are two specific possibilities which are relevant to us. The person wanting one specific reward, or the person wanting to collect the whole set. So, how hard is it to achieve these two goals? That's the question. Now this is a part where we'd apply all the fancy mathematical equations and methods to obtain the correct probabilities. But screw teaching all that with the correct terms and shit. I'll be honest, I also couldn't even if I wanted to. So I'll be going through the basics, explaining stuff in the simplest manner possible as we go. And if I am wrong, by the powers of the internet, someone will surely correct me on the comments. Respectfully. Hopefully. So let's picture a real Gachapon machine. To start real simple, inside there are 6 capsules, which with its unique monster. Of course you can tell which capsule is which, and we only want our favorite one, which is Caroline. Everybody loves Caroline. So, to get Caroline over here, how many times would you have to try and give the gacha a go to get it? Let's state that, of course, it's up to luck and chance. Chance we can predict, while luck is simply luck. But when it comes to gacha, there's a third very important key concept that I also want to bring up, and that most people don't even realize how major of a role it plays. But I'll save it for after we are done with these scenarios. So for now, let's just move on. When faced with this example we proposed, people will often say, oh, I'll get it on the first try. Or maybe not on the first try, but on the second one for sure. But how correct are these assumptions in reality? From a probability standpoint, we can get a clearer view on the subject. A 50% chance, the famous coin toss scenario, it's what's called an even chance, the only time where the odds of winning or losing are the same. Therefore, we can also consider that any odd that's above 50% can be probable. And, of course, any odd under 50% can be called improbable. Back to our capsule monsters, there's 6 of them. And for the first scenario, we only want one specific monster. So, we divide the one we want by the 6 that exist using a fraction, and there you have it. The probability of getting Caroline on the first try at the gacha, which is 0.1666 or 16.67%. when rounded and converted into a percentage. Not the most probable of odds, as you can see. And as for the probability of getting Caroline on the second try if you didn't get it on the first try, going back to the fraction we used, we just reduced the number of capsules from 6 to 5, since we took the capsule out that didn't have Caroline in it. 1 divided by 5 equals 0.2, or 20%. This is how you do this stuff. And as you can see, still not very probable. Actually, in this scenario, it's never probable to get what you want on the first try, because the chances to get one specific monster never go above 50% unless there's that one single capsule alone on the gacha, at which that point it becomes certainty. So, both assumptions are false. Now, moving on to the second example, let's imagine we want to collect all 6 of them. But instead of there just being one capsule for each monster, there are 10, making for a grand total of 60 capsules inside the machine. So, the question we want to ask is, what's the probability of collecting all of them without getting a repeated monster? I mean, there's not much use for repeats. And it's just 6 monsters, right? How hard could it be? The probabilities in this scenario are harder to grasp. But behind that difficulty lies the secret to the use of Gachapon. And according to the calculations, with 60 capsules, 6 different monsters, 0.019 or a 2% rounded up chance of collecting them all and not getting a single repeated monster. What this means is that basically you will always be consuming more of the product and spending more money on it than you ever intended to on the first place, without realizing it until it's too late. And now it's the time to bring back the concept I was alluding to a little while back. Perception. There's a reason why gacha is so popular nowadays. It fools customers into spending more on a product than they ever would otherwise. It's simple. You see the machine, you see the price tag, you think of what you want to get, your brain correlates the three things, and you spend many more times the amount you were planning to in the first place. Sometimes to not even get what you wanted. Also for physical gachapon, this system doubles down as a marketing strategy, since there's a good chance you might give away the repeats, therefore giving visibility to the product and maybe interesting other person on getting invested on the whole thing. And the thing regarding how gacha works is that even when you have a minimum understanding of the probabilities in your mind, which in itself it's rare for most people, there's always a what if associated with luck. Maybe I can get what I want on the first try. Maybe I can get it before spending a huge amount. It's almost like an itch that you have to scratch, you know? The just one more, just one more, just one more kind of mentality. And when your luck keeps failing, your brain might even start resorting to a sunken cost fallacy. Which is, I have already gone so far that I might as well go all in so I don't come out empty-handed out of this. And when you do finally end up getting a rare gacha, by getting lucky, or most likely not getting lucky but spending an absurd amount of money instead, the endorphin high you'll get will make you want more. So you might have gotten lucky once at the gacha, but when you try to get lucky twice, or thrice for that matter, you'll realize that while luck is random, it will certainly fail you eventually. The only certain thing is that probability systems put in place by companies to generate money will turn a profit over time. That's why casinos are a thing. By the way, an important side note. Be mindful that we used very small numbers on the equations for the sake of better understanding the mathematics in use. The number of capsules inside a real gachapon machine, for example, are closer to the hundreds. And also for the calculations this video presented, things like the rarity of each item were left out of the equation. Otherwise, you can be certain that the probabilities would have been minuscule compared to the ones we got. But keep in mind that those minuscule numbers are actually what you're dealing with when using an actual gacha. Actually, there's a third final and very important gacha scenario we need to consider before moving on. Going back to the 6 capsule 6 monster hypothesis, what is the probability of getting Kerorin on the second try after having failed getting it on the first try if, instead of a real gachapon machine, we use a virtual gacha like the ones you find on mobile games? Many people would again answer 20%, like I explained earlier. But in this scenario, that answer is wrong, and it's actually a 16.67% chance. Let me introduce you to the mathematical concept of reposition. In the very first scenario, the 6 different capsules, even having the worst luck possible, after drawing 6 capsules you get what you want, because you exhausted the gacha of its possibilities. But what if every time you took out a capsule, a same capsule was put back in place inside the machine? In that case, no matter how many times you try to use the machine, the probabilities of getting what you want remain unchanged from what they were in the beginning, since the numbers never decrease. And that's the case for all virtual gacha games. Of course, virtually nothing is getting reposited, because nothing was ever taken from there in the first place. This means that in these systems, with enough bad luck on your side, nothing is stopping you from spending all your available money and not getting the item that you wanted. Gacha games. And this is the perfect time to address 2 things I have written in a post titled "Don't Forget" before delving further into the topic. Talking from personal experience, it's mostly useless to try and dissuade people that are hooked on gacha games from spending money on them. It's the same thing as walking to a drug den and going, "Drugs are bad!" And pretty much like addicts, they will resort to all kinds of mental gymnastics to justify their behavior. And when they get angry enough because you keep denying their bullshit logic, they will eventually turn hostile against you. And let's make no mistake here and address the possible elephant in the room for you, the viewer at home. I am totally against gacha mechanics tied to microtransaction payments, for reasons I will lay out plain as day later. And I'm also fully aware that by making this video, I might get some angry people knocking at my virtual doorstep. Really, from a financial perspective, I should be making this video more in the veins of, "Oh, gacha games can be lame sometimes, but it's totally okay to spend copious amounts of money on them regularly. The money's yours, so don't listen to what other people have to say, and just enjoy your game, my gacha living friend. Oh, I also have a Patreon here where I get my living from, so since you're rich enough to be spending money on a mobile game, maybe you could help a friend out." I don't work like that though. To the detriment of my financial success, yes, but my decisions in life were made a long time ago. At the end of the day, people that support these games are free to do whatever they want. I know that. But at the end of the day, I am also going to voice my genuine opinion on the subject and explain the logic behind said opinion, even if it causes discomfort, and even if I am losing more by speaking up than I would by keeping quiet. But then again, that's the way I decided to live my life, so please understand. In short, this is a touchy subject to people deeply involved in it, so keep that in mind if you are thinking of sending this video to a gacha game aficionado. If anything happens, remember that I warned you. And with that now out of the way, I am free to begin dissecting gacha mechanics to show you how bad things get, no holds barred. Which nicely segues into the second thing I want to address. I'm not here to debunk all the absolutely stupid shit you hear people saying while defending gacha games. But there's one assumption, one logic in particular, that I keep seeing multiple times and I really got to put a stop to it. So, often you see people like the ones I just described writing things on internet forums in defense of the gacha game's rare pull rates. Things like, the probability rates of 3% or even 1% are not that bad actually, because for 1% if I use the gacha 100 times, then I'll win it for sure, because statistically that totals 100%. 100% pulls isn't even that much and the developers need to make money. Boy. Let's see the problem through this lens. If there's a 1% chance to get what you want, to win, then there's a 99% chance to not get what you want, to lose. So, mathematically, what's the probability of losing 100 times if the probability of losing each time is 99%? Well, you just have to multiply 99% by 99% by 99% 100 times, which corresponds to the 100 tries, and you get the value of 0.366. or 36.6%, which is a slightly bigger probability than 1% chance of winning. Actually, the probability of failing 458 consecutive times is 1.002%, which is still a bigger chance than 1%. Yes, when talking about a virtual 1% chance of getting something, you are more likely to fail 458 times in a row than getting what you want. Probabilities, perception, gacha games. And mind you, this is just one of the tricks. Who wrote this? So allow me now to talk a little bit more about the other tricks developers implement and use in order to get people hooked into spending rivers of cash via microtransactions without even realizing it. For instance, we can start with the idea of the virtual gachapon. While there is a correlation between the virtual and the physical machine in the sense that you don't know what you're getting and it's up to luck what you draw, mobile gaming companies decided to call what they are doing gachapon because people on the eastern markets, where it all started, have been familiar with the physical machines and using them for decades. However, when translated to the digital form, they get tricked by the perceived odds due to the reposition aspect. Because in reality, instead of gachapon, you could call this anything else, especially if your target audience is not an eastern audience. You could call them loot boxes, I don't know. The use of probabilities is just the tip of the iceberg though. So let's broaden the scope past gacha games, while still including them, and tackle the whole mobile microtransaction market. An accompanying feature of mobile games is gems. Well, sometimes it's gold, most times it's gems. Every mobile game and many other games pushing microtransactions have their own premium currency inside the game that directly correlates to real money. This is made so your brain dissociates that you are spending real money that you could be using in the real world. You know, for things like food, friends, better games, or even anything else really. And instead, you are spending fun bucks to get
great rewards and accomplishment.
While actually you are spending real money just to get access to content that is already present on your device, just locked behind some server access and lines of code. Content, by the way, that you paid and that at any time can be modified or even taken away from you. And legally, you are entitled to exactly zero of it. But that's a conversation for another time. The gems themselves have a standard price. But don't worry, because you can pay less by paying more if you get a great deal bundle. Or one of the special promotions you can't miss. Which you literally can't miss because they are always available in one shape or another. Also of note is the strategy of giving the player an uneven amount of gems that can never be completely used out, so that the number sits there enticing you to add to it just a little bit more so those gems you already purchased don't go to waste, quote unquote. Ever heard of daily missions? The dailies? They are used to create a routine in your brain of playing the game frequently, making it more difficult for you to quit playing if you want to. The time you then put into the game due to the dailies forcing you to play it when you didn't even want to open the app then leads to yet another sunken cost fallacy, when the players start playing the game not for fun, but to not regret and waste the time, effort and money they already spent into said game. On the same vein, the energy systems that you see everywhere that replenish over time are made for this purpose of creating a routine as well. But also so people that play the game the first few times and like it are denied the pleasure of playing the game to their heart's content, hooking them into the experience and sometimes even making them shell off money to replenish said energy. Also, let's not forget the refer a friend tactic, a classic of these games. Basically, it gives players the ability to become bona fide marketers and pull their friends into the game, in exchange for a miserly amount of currency, of course. Did you know that it's scientifically proven that people spend more money on something if they can relate to it on a personal level? And that people spend more money on holidays? So, well, now you know why every single live service game has Halloween events, Christmas events, and especially the Chinese New Year events. Even though the chances are you don't even celebrate the Chinese New Year. But nonetheless, nowadays you see them everywhere. That Chinese money, it's something, let me tell you. Also, here's some possible revelations for you. Loot boxes are just differently packaged gacha, with a more western flavor at the end of the day. I'm kinda retroactively spoiling my previous joke, but still, it's something that needs to be stated. Oh, and trading card games are also gacha, but at least they are physical gacha, and as such can be owned, traded, and have monetary value, which make them much more benign than digital gacha. So when you see a physical booster of cards saying limited time edition, that's fine and everything. But on the other hand, all the limited time things you find inside of gacha games, the famous banners you see all the gacha players gushing about, you know, it's very difficult for anything software-wise to be limited in any way, shape or form, since copy and paste is a thing that exists. Maybe if there's a license from another IP holder being used like for some music or characters from a different franchise, but certainly not a new character or weapon or consumable. That and all the constant countdown timers you see are just there to create a feeling of urgency where there wouldn't be one. So the player is pressed to spend money without thinking much about it. Also, if people start getting too privy to the gacha term and the bad connotations associated with it, instead of gacha we can change the name to summoning, scouting, or something else so people are not playing the game with a defensive mindset. As you might have deduced, the truth is that the companies specialized in making mobile games do not employ designers as much as they employ psychology majors. The goal of these developers is not making the games fun, but rather making them the most profitable, by any means necessary, using every single trick in the book to make people spend the largest amount of money possible. If you're interested, these people are called monetization experts. And if you think that AAA games from the 2000s forward are worse than they used to be, it's because monetization experts are given more power by the publishers over a game project than the game developers themselves. But that's a topic for another day. Point is, the gacha game is a wolf in sheep's clothing, a game that presents itself as a harmless and fun free-to-play experience while actually being an absolutely predatory piece of software that by the end is neither fun nor free. And it's also a balancing act of keeping the player's ability to tolerate the game just a moment away from dipping into fuck this shit territory, while on the other hand, loading it with the maximum amount of bullshit possible, making the player pay for virtually anything they can get away with, while creating and taking advantage of people with addictive personalities. Gacha developers don't care about the player base at any other level than a monetary one. Which is also why, in contrast with regular video game developers, they don't care about having their names visible on the product. By this point, I don't think you'll be surprised if I tell you that most of these developers' time is spent analyzing data and player behavior rather than improving the game or solving problems. Since at the end of the day, the level of know-how of how to get the players addicted to gambling is the only thing that distinguishes different gacha game developers. Otherwise, all gacha games are basically the same game on a fundamental level. This is also a good time to shortly explain whaling, which is the business plan gacha games are built upon. Originally, how things work is that video games had a price tag. You paid the price and that was it. Of course, with the advent of the internet, microtransactions then became possible, and unfortunately a thing. Gacha games, however, went a step further and ditched the price tag convention for a much more insidious and lucrative business venture. So, the whaling metaphor goes a little bit like this. For the company that starts the development of the gacha game, normally a publisher or an investment company, video game players are like an ocean, full of life, and so money is invested up front into paying for a crew, which is the actual devs and the always present PR team, but also for a ship with the best possible equipment budget-wise in order to fish. The ship being not only the gacha game itself, but also the IP if already existent, plus possible crossovers to attract players. After everything is ready, the bait and the nets being cast, that would be the marketing, the only thing left is to fish. But not any fish will do. Think about it. Why would anyone invest millions into an ocean-faring boat just to catch fish you could catch on the shore with a regular fishing pole? So what gacha games really want are the big catches. The big game you can't get anywhere else. And nothing is a bigger catch on the whole wide ocean than a whale. Now, bringing the metaphor to reality, what this means is that very roughly 90% of a gacha game player base never spends a cent on the game, while the other 9% spends a quantity of money below $100, and the final 1% of players spends hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars on the game. Small fish, dolphins, whales, respectively. While dolphins are an okay catch, the real objective is to get those $1,000 spending whales. For two main reasons. The first is that the magic of implementing microtransactions is that there's no ceiling to the revenue you might earn. So while normally one product is bound to one price tag paid for upfront like I stated earlier, in microtransaction land that's not the case. If gacha games and mobile games spread from east to west, becoming the colossi they are today after having sucked every big franchise under the sun into their ranks, it's because for the investors that control the video game industry that have never touched a video game before, the mobile microtransaction game is a magical product they can manufacture that can turn potentially infinite profits, at the minimum fee of keeping a server running and adding some updates here and there. So of course, what they really want are the whale consumers which will maximize and skyrocket the profits to never seen before heights. Or to recap, from a business perspective, in a classic single-player game for the developers and publishers, every player is worth the same, due to the one price tag everyone pays. But in a free-to-play microtransaction game such as the gacha game, players who don't pay are worth next to nothing. while the whales are worth everything, and so they are the most important audience, the focus and the reason for the existence of the game, and as such everything is done in order to cater to them. Which leads us to the second reason for the practice of whaling: gambling addiction. If you happen to study marketing, you will learn that a consumer that spends money consistently is better than a consumer that spends lots of money but only on rare occasions. So a consumer that does both is a dream come true, right? But what if we could get a consumer that spends consistently, spends a lot, and cannot quit spending even if it wants to? That, my friends, is the whale. In order to really bring the money home, gacha developers make sure that their games have the perfect ecology to attract two specific player types, or whale types if you will: the collecting type and the winning type. The collecting type is a player/whale that wants to have one of everything, a completionist, or it can be a player that has loyalty to something in particular, like big anime, whether by nature or to attachment to one franchise in particular. These players really want to collect all characters and costumes, so in order to keep them around, the developers just need to add constant new characters and keep those percentages low to the ground so whales can keep shelling out the cash. The winning type whales, on the other hand, are slightly different. Winning type players are not just players who like to win, because that's everyone, let's be honest, and they themselves can be divided in subtypes. Players who only care about winning no matter the cost in order to be the top at something, normally the people who gravitate towards ranking boards and the like. Players who really like to win and be superior to others but dislike putting effort into it. And players who hate the feeling of losing. Or better put, players who hate the feeling of not performing well, and that will go to any lengths to make sure that that doesn't happen. To milk these whales, the concept is simple. You pay, you get access to exclusive stuff better than anything else, you win. You don't pay, you don't get the good stuff behind the paywall, you lose. There's also always the illusion that if you play enough, know the gameplay well, and get lucky with the gacha without paying real money or paying very little, you'll still be able to compete with other players that pay. However, that illusion is completely false in every single game I have encountered. But I'll wait for part 2 of this video to show the specifics and prove what I am talking about. Point is, there's a good reason why these games are called freemium. And there's a good reason for the gaming mantra free to play, pay to win. Or free to pay if you're feeling cheeky. And remember, fair competition and meritocracy is for losers who do not have the money to get the front row seat in life, says Asia. Also, I think that by now we are already past the point of discussing whether gacha and loot boxes cause gambling addiction. Yes, they do. I know it, you know it, everybody that has been gaming for years knows it. And if everything I have shown on this video, the multiple research papers on the subject, or even the world governments taking interest while the companies using these schemes shit themselves while trying to defend them, I don't know what else to tell you.
But it's not gambling if you aren't winning real money.
Actually, your brain just has to perceive the feeling of worth plus winning versus losing and perpetuate those feelings in a rapid succession for gambling addiction to kick in. What you win doesn't matter.
But in these systems you are always winning something, so gambling addiction can't be triggered by them.
Sure, lots of people believe that because their judgment of gambling addiction is solely based on things like real-life casinos and slot machines. But how can I put this? In mobile gaming systems where you have a 1% chance to win a 5-star rarity golden sword and a 99% chance to win some great, not 5-star wooden swords and sticks, sure, when you get your first stick instead of the golden sword, you won't be too disappointed with the fancy stick. But when you have hundreds of sticks piling up on the corner and no golden sword in sight, your brain will surely start correlating 5 stars with win and not 5 stars with loss. Which is what happens to every person who plays loot box gacha games. But while the people responsible for making the laws are old men whose concept of video games is Pong on the Atari and maybe the word Fortnite, things will be very slow to change. But that's the final piece of the puzzle if you think about it. There are 4 intervenants in this story that explain it all. Us, informed people and a droplet of water in the ocean, a 99% ultra-casual audience whose gaming literacy makes them oblivious to everything happening in these games, the adepts, and finally the publishers and developers profiteering from all this while trying to perpetuate these scams for the longest possible. So, to recap and answer the question of why these mobile microtransaction games are so abundant and pervasive in today's world, they are simple and cheap to make, they are available to everyone due to being on mobile platforms and free to start, they are easy and accessible to even the most uninformed of consumers, taking just a few clicks from seeing an ad to actually be playing the game, they bring millions in revenue due to gambling addiction and obfuscated schemes to part the players from their money, and finally, their duplicitous nature. On the surface, very friendly and easy to figure out with nothing to hide. You just pay if you want, nobody's forcing you to do anything, no pressure. But under that facade lies a meticulous build and very complex extortion machine, constructed from the ground up to deceive and mislead. And that shrouded complexity serves as a shield for the mobile microtransaction game, greatly deflecting any criticism, investigation or evidence-based judgment from taking place on the subject of the gambling aspects, which then allows these predatory practices to go mostly unchecked and continue being used for who knows how long. Not for much longer, let's hope. Oh, and you can be certain that these publishers and developers are fully aware of what they're doing. Hell, even from a logic perspective, not all the luck or quality in the world can justify constantly earning hundreds of millions in profits on one of the most saturated markets that has ever existed in the history of humankind. To me, the fact that they deny how manipulative these games are is just the icing on top of the cake. And at the end of my notes I also have written, morality? So sure, let's ask that question. Do the whales want to spend these crazy amounts of money? No, not really from what I've gathered. I think it's not a hot take to say that a person that spends hundreds to thousands of dollars monthly just to own some fancy .pngs on a cell phone is not a person with great mental health. But hey, it's a modern video game industry, and it's all about making the most amount of money possible. So where do you think we are? And if adults are gullible enough to get hooked into this stuff, think of children. How many billion views combined do you think there are on all FIFA loot box opening videos on YouTube? How much exposure is that? Just a thought. Conclusion. Free-to-play microtransaction games are extremely bad in all regards. But the money though? And what better games than gacha games for the job? Cheaper to produce than regular video games, low investment, high profit, and bring much more money. Plus everybody's doing them, so we gotta accept them. Congratulations, and fuck gaming as we knew it. I think that you can now see why I was so inclined to make this video. And trust me, there's still much more scum I haven't talked about. Like the examples you see on the screen. But this first part has been going for way too long. So finally, now that we, hopefully, have a better grasp on the whole gacha thingy, we can finally talk about the concrete video game. So let's tackle the X2 in part 2. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. Making this is a passion of mine, and I take their creation very seriously. Unfortunately, as you might know, videos this researched and long don't pop out of the ether. So, you guessed it. If you liked this video and found it informative, please consider helping my work through influencing the algorithm by divulging the channel and doing the likes and subscribes and all that stuff. Or if you really want to be a lifesaver, you can directly support me through more direct means. But I really need it because God knows that these niche videos that take months of work to make can't compete with the channels that simply shovel trash content at the viewers non-stop on the daily. Because YouTube sure does love the trash and suffocating new channels that rather focus on quality. So please consider supporting in any way you can. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this video. Napkin out.